Python basics. All right. Actually I'm going to split the screen here. So I've got JavaScript file on my right-hand side, and I have a Python file on my left side of my VS Code. All right. So Python files have the extension .py. JavaScript files have extension .js. Let me see. All right, so let's just quickly review. How do you define a variable in JavaScript?
Let, const, or var.
So like let name equals Tom. So let, you can also use the const or var. All right, so like name has a string Tom. If I do like let age equals, 35. Cool. So we have strings in JavaScript. We have integers in JavaScript as well. But the equivalent in Python could be easier, could be a little more frustrating. Just depends on what you think. So if I wanted to define a variable with a variable name called name in Python, I don't have to do any let, const, or var keywords. I can just type name equals Tom. So this is how to define a variable. Also, comments are doing the hash or the pound sign. So comments. So here's a variable named Tom. Here's a variable named age. I can say like 31. Cool. All right. So pretty basic how to define variables in JavaScript and Python. Let name, age. If I wanted to do it a conditional statement in Python or in JavaScript, I can do if, like if age is greater than 21, console log, welcome to the bar. Else if age equals, I'm just making stuff up, 18, console.log, you can vote. Else, console log, go away. So in JavaScript, you need to have brackets, parentheses, etc. With Python, you don't need brackets or anything, but Python is strictly dependent on indentation. So indentation matters. Whereas in JavaScript, it doesn't really matter indentation. As long as the code is between like these curly braces, the if statement will run. So I can say like console log, here. It doesn't matter. I can even put this like all the way over here. All the code within here will run. In Python, indentation matters. So if I were to do this equivalent in Python, I can say if, but in Python, I don't need the parentheses or curly braces. I can just say, hey, if age is greater than 21. Now, what the way I tell Python that this is the end of this if statement is using a colon. So if age is greater than 21 and I press enter, notice how it's already indented a little bit. And instead of console logs, I can write, oh, whoops. I don't know why I did that. I can write print. So print, welcome to the bar. And instead of else if statements, they're elif. Like else if, but it's just called elif. Age equals 18, colon, print, you can vote. And then else colon print go away. What questions do you have about like the differences between these two so far?
Real quick, I just have one about the equality. Like with JavaScript, you have like the two equal sign. Exactly. Is there something like that in Python?
Nope. In Python, there is no triple equals. It's always just double equals. So it's one of the things you don't really have to worry about. There is no equality by type and value. It's just always double equals.
So is it basically that's not checking type checking. It's just making sure it's is double equals equivalent to the JavaScript double equals?
That's actually a good question. Let's check that out. So if I do 18, but as a string, and if I run this, so and how to run Python code, where in JavaScript, we would do node followed by the intro.js. That's how you would run, this file. In Python, we run Python followed by the Python file. So looks here. Yep. So this does check type as well.
So that's the equivalent to triple equals.
Correct.
All right.
So if I were to run that again, you can vote. A lot of people also, if you run the Python keyword and it doesn't work, you can also run Python 3, which saying, hey, use Python 3 whatever version, 3.1, or I can't remember what Python version it is, and that will still work. So Python or Python 3. If you run Python 3, you're explicitly saying, hey, run the 3. So if I do Python, 3.9 version. But if I run just Python, it runs the default version of Python on your machine, which is mine is Python 3.9. All right. What other questions do you have?
I forget what the word is, but in JavaScript, you can use backticks and include variables to concatenate. Is there anything like that in Python?
So concatenate variables with strings, like
It means
like
interpolation.
string interpolation. Yep.
Yeah.
So yep, we can definitely do that here as well. It does look a little different depending on the version of Python, but since we're using Python 3.9, so if I wanted to say age 18, I can say, let's say, 31. Here, if I want to say like, you are blank, like 31 years old, you can come into the bar. Like so. And if I wanted this to be string interpolate this variable, what I can do is do an F string. I think it stands for formatted string. And then here, all I need to do is open brackets, closing brackets, and type in that the variable inside of those curly braces. So if I run that, I can say you are 31 years old, you are 32. And this can be either single quotes or double quotes, but it can't be, you can't use them both interchangeably. So this is string interpolation. Probably spelled that wrong. Like so. All right, what other questions do you have? We're gonna get to for loops next as well. All right. So for loops in JavaScript. So if I wanted to loop through, like if I did fizzbuzz, like to 30 or whatever, I would do for let I equals, 1, I is greater than, or I'm sorry, I is less than like, or equal to 30, or it can be some like array dot length. Some if this array to get that number. But anyway, this needs to have a number here. And then after each iteration, it increases I by 1. I can do like console log. What is it? So if we did string interpolation, iterated
$sign.
times. So if I had to run that, node intro.js, there's that. Now, there's multiple ways you can do it in Python. Well, actually, first, let's talk about this a little bit more. So if I needed to, let's go let fruits equals apple, banana, watermelon. I don't know if that's how you spell it. Cherry. If I wanted to loop through this array and print each fruit, so I'd go fruits dot length, and I can grab each fruit like so. So if I did this, iterating through one time, have it display banana. Oh, what did I do here? So it looks like it didn't.
You started at 1, not 0.
Thank you.
You knew that.
So here we go, apples, banana, watermelon, cherry. So that's typically how you'd want to use a for loop, because rarely do you actually want to just iterate through some arbitrary number. It's usually you want to iterate through something, some data. If I were to do the same thing over here in Python, I can do it multiple ways. So if I wanted to create a variable called fruits, and I'm just going to copy this over here, like so. But first, I can execute for loops a couple of ways, as I mentioned. So I can do for like I in, and if I wanted to use just a blanket number, kind of like I did like 30 over here initially, if I wanted to do loop through something 30 times, I can do for like I in range. So this is where you want to use this keyword range, or this method range. And it's like, what do I want to iterate through? So I want to iterate through something 30 times. And if I just do that and I print I like so, I'm going to actually comment out this code. So this range function can take in one argument, or I'm sorry, one argument, but up to, I think up to 4, but typically it's 1 to 3. So I'll just kind of show you what that looks like. So Python intro. So this iterates through starting from 0. So if I don't add a starting point, it automatically starts at index 0 or 0. And it goes all the way up to 29. So it starts at 0 and it goes up to 30, but not inclusive. So it's exclusive of 30. So if I wanted to go up to 30, I would do 0 to 30. So it starts at 0 and it goes all the way up to 30. But say I wanted to start at 1. That's where I can do start at 1 and go up to 30. So if I clear that, go up to starts at 1 and goes up to 30. But if we look over here, just like the for loop, we can increment by 1, where this is incrementing it by 1 net, like by default. But in here, if I wanted to increment, what is it? Plus equals. If I want to increment every 2 times here, I can do plus equals 2. So it starts at 0, 2, etc. Over here for this range, it can take an additional third argument, which is the step. How many times is, or what's the step? So instead of it increasing by 1, I want to increase it by 2. So if I clear that, and now it just starts at 1 and increments every 2. So 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. I can do increment by 5 if I wanted to. Like so. All right.
So I have a quick question. So if you wanted to go down, would your starting point then be 31 and your ending point would be 1? So you just flip the starting and ending?
That's 1. Let's see. If I do 1 there, let's see what happens. Uh-oh. Does anybody know?
It's gonna default to 1, so you'd have to put a -1.
Like there?
I think so.
Let's try.
Pretty
check
sure.
that. Uh-oh.
Oh wait, no, you starting at 1, start at 31, end at 1. And then, yeah, that's right now.
See that? There we go. So starts at 31, ends at 1, but it's not inclusive of 1. So if I want to actually end at 1, I need to see if this works. Like so. Thought there was an easier way to do that. Let's see. Decrement range Python. So real Python is a good resource. So yeah, I guess this would be the way to do it. All right. I guess I'm thinking of slicing. Yeah, anyway. So yep, so you can start from 31, go down to 1 and decrement by 1. Now if you decrement by 2, by 2. Cool. So, but say I want to iterate through here, this fruits array. So this input, I want to iterate through the length of this fruits array and print out the what fruits I. So I need to grab the length of this fruits array by doing len for length and go in that fruits array. Let's see if this works. There we go. So that's one way we can do that. Let's actually go back. I'm going to just create a copy of it. So if we can test the length of that fruits array by doing length fruits. If I clear the terminal on that, so length is 4. And now here it's printing I 1, 2, 3. And I can grab the value within the fruits array by its index, just like you do in Python or JavaScript, like so. What questions do you have about iterating through using a for loop in Python?
A quick question, as far as the array setup, it's the exact same thing in Java as it is in Python, correct?
The array setup, like this part?
Yeah, like inside, like you could array an array.
Yep. So yeah, everything is the same. You can have an array of arrays, etc. Yeah. Yep. As in JavaScript, yes. So just know of the range method in Python, but there's also another way we can do it. Because typically in JavaScript, you loop through an array by its index, and in order to grab that value, you have to do like fruits by the index. Whereas in Python here, we're doing grabbing the range using a number. And just like we're doing here in JavaScript, we're accessing the value in the array by its index. But Python's kind of nice with us. That's why I kind of like it, is that we can just iterate through this fruits array by saying for fruit in the fruits array, print the fruit. If I did that, I can access the value directly. So that makes life a little bit easier for us. And I can say like, hey, if fruit equals cherry, print, that's or is my favorite, something like that. So apples, bananas, watermelon, cherry is my favorite. Else. I'm just making up some like just random logic. So you can access the value directly by just iterating through the array. So you don't have to use this range feature, or this range method. Any questions?
So a nested for loop would be pretty much the same as it is in JavaScript, just the syntax is different.
Yes. So yeah, again, nested for loops would be just the same. So you do like for I in range or for I in fruits or something like that. Yep. All right. But there's multiple ways to iterate in Python. So it's not just this basic for loop. We can also do a while loop. So like while I is less than fruits length of the fruits. Again, you'd have to do like, I'll just say IDX is 0. And then print fruits IDX and IDX plus equals 1. So in JavaScript, it's if you want to increment by one, you can just do I plus plus. In Python, they don't have that feature, but you have to do I plus equals 1. So it's kind of the same.
You've got a greater than, and I think you want less than.
You are correct. Thank you for that. So again, Python, you can use while loops as well. Be perfectly candid, I rarely ever use those. But again, there's even another way we can iterate through an array. So here we iterate through fruit. So we grab each fruit in the array. But what if I wanted the index as well? They have this method called enumerate. So I can say for counter or index. And what it really is, what counter value and enumerate in the fruits array. So this enumerate takes in an array and it returns a tuple, which is the index and the value at that index. So I can print the counter and the value. So if I ran that, so apple is at index 0. So you can kind of see that. Banana is at index 1. Watermelon is at index 2. Cherry is at index 3. And you can call these whatever you want. Index. If you ever see me do any like shortcuts on VS Code, just and you want to know, let me know. Value fruit, like so. And that still does the same thing. All right. What questions do you have about the enumerate? So enumerate takes in a or a list or an array. All right. Let's talk about objects or dictionaries. Everything is the same in JavaScript, but we're in JavaScript. If I needed to create an object, just like I did with something like key, and then this value. So like key is like age, value is 31. Name. What's going on here? Oh,
Got your equal sign.
yep. Here, so in JavaScript, these are objects. In Python, they're referred to as either objects, but more specifically, they're referred to as dictionaries. In a lot of languages, these objects are called dictionaries. So I can, object equals, and the really only differences here is that your keys need to have quotes around them, or else it doesn't know what they are. And here, dictionaries can be like reading, etc. So you can have an array as a value in a dictionary in Python, just like you can in JavaScript. I want to show you. And just like you can iterate through objects in JavaScript, like we did with the Roman numerals, you can do for key in object, and you can print f string then object key, and that would print out the values. What am I looking at? That. All right. What other questions do you have about dictionaries in Python? All right. How do you write a function in Python? Similar, kind of how we've been doing this. Like in JavaScript, there's multiple ways we can write functions using anonymous functions, fat arrow functions. In Python, it's pretty straightforward. I can write define, DEF, define a function that's called like print object values. And then parentheses, parentheses, some object followed by a colon. And then here, I'm just gonna actually loop through. So for key and some object, I'm going to print the values of the object. So I defined a function or a method. So in Python, functions are also called methods. So I defined a method called print object values. I'm passing in some object. I'm going to loop through. So for the key in some object that I'm passing in, I'm going to print that the object's values. Whoop. And then in order to invoke that function or that method, I can pass in that object. So like this object up here. And I can say key like so. If I run that the key is age, name, hobbies, values is 31, Tom, and this array. All right. What questions do you have about this? No questions? You all got it?
So it's the same setup for iterating over a dictionary as it is a list in Python. Very similar, but the only difference is we're doing in range rather than for in.
So yeah, so if you decide to use the range, or you're doing for, it's actually pretty much the same. So if you decide to use a range, it'd be for index in some range or for value in some list. So it's pretty much the same.
So you could use range on a dictionary and a list, and you can also use
So
a for in loop on a dictionary and a list.
So you can't use range on a dictionary. So for dictionaries, it's always just for key in object.
Okay. But you
And-
can do for in with a list. Okay.
Correct. Yep. So for in for a list. And this is for in for the using a range. And this is enumerate. So there's three ways to iterate through a list in Python. You can use the for index and range, for value in the list, or the for index or the value in enumerate with the list passed in to the method. And if you Google like how to iterate through objects, so through a list in Python, I'm sure there's gonna be a bunch of ways. So you can do for in this list, for I in range. You can use a while loop. You can use list comprehension, but we're not going to get into that part. The only example they didn't give here is enumerate. All right. Yeah, good questions. What other questions do you have? All right. If nobody has any questions,
I have one question.
yep.
When you
Tasha?
created the object, we're also in Python able to put functions inside the object also, correct?
So are you able to define a method like so?
Yeah, within the object.
That's a good question. I don't think so. Does anybody know this off the top of their head? I've never seen it done before.
Okay. I know you can in Java, how you
Yep.
can define a method, the function within the object.
Yeah,
I
in
wasn't
Java,
sure.
yeah, in JavaScript you can. So like some function, like function. Yeah, you can do that in here in JavaScript, but not. I've never seen it done in Python actually. This is rare though. Like you rarely ever see this. But you can do it in JavaScript. That's a good
Okay.
question though.
I'm looking at something online, and if you define the function outside of the object, and then you could come back and add it to the object. I mean, I'm sorry, I called it an object. It's a dictionary.
Yeah. So I'm going to create like some object. And just so you know, JavaScript is camel case. So all the variables, names, and everything are together, such as like, so here the syntax is wrong. It should say some object underscore values. So, so if I decided to yep, so I think this is what we're referring to, right? Some object func, and you pass in object. I don't know. I'm just messing around now. Yeah. Okay. I've never seen it done like this before, but this works. So you're, as you said, define the function outside of the dictionary and then just assign that value in the dictionary, in a separate dictionary, to that method. Yeah, you'll rarely ever do that. I don't think I've ever seen anybody do that before, and you'll never have to actually do that.
Okay, I was just curious.
Oh yeah, it's a good question. I didn't know the answer to it. All right. Any other questions before we take a quick break? All right. So yeah, let's go ahead and